Rainwater dripped from the gutters of Walter Hayes' farmhouse as black funeral cars disappeared down the muddy road. The flowers on the porch were still fresh, their sweet scent mixing with wet earth and cigarette smoke, but grief had already vanished from the house. Inside, drawers slammed open, cabinet doors banged against cracked walls. Relatives moved through the rooms like scavengers who had been starving for years. Emily stood quietly near the staircase, clutching her coat tighter around herself as her Uncle Victor yanked an antique clock from the mantel. Across the room, her cousin Denise emptied silverware into grocery bags while whispering angrily about bank accounts nobody could locate. Someone upstairs laughed after discovering Walter's collection of old coins. Nobody spoke about Walter himself. Not the lonely evenings he spent staring across dead cornfields. Not the way he always waited by the window whenever Emily visited. Not the silence that filled the house after his wife died. Only money mattered now. Emily watched another uncle remove framed paintings from the dining room wall so aggressively that plaster crumbled onto the floor beneath him. Nearby, two relatives argued over who deserved Walter's pickup truck before the burial flowers had even begun to wilt. The farmhouse no longer felt like a home. It felt violated. And somewhere beneath the noise, beneath the greed and bitterness echoing through those narrow halls, Emily felt something colder settle into her chest. Walter had known this would happen. Emily had spent most of her life being underestimated. At 32, she worked double shifts at a grocery store outside town, drove a rusted sedan that coughed smoke every winter morning, and lived in a tiny apartment where the kitchen lights flickered whenever the heater turned on. To the rest of the Hayes family, she was the disappointment nobody discussed directly, but constantly judged in silence. Victor called her fragile. Denise called her unlucky, but Walter never did. Years earlier, when the rest of the family stopped visiting the farmhouse, Emily kept showing up every Sunday with groceries and fresh batteries for his radio. She remembered cold mornings repairing broken fence posts beside him while fog rolled across the empty fields. Walter rarely spoke much during those moments, yet the silence between them never felt uncomfortable. Sometimes they drank tea in the dim kitchen, while rain tapped softly against the windows. Walter would stare toward the hallway where old family photographs hung crooked on faded wallpaper, his tired eyes lingering on faces that no longer visited. "Funny thing about people," he once murmured quietly. "They only value things after they're gone." Emily never knew whether he meant money, family, or something else entirely. Back then, she assumed loneliness had simply made him bitter. Now, standing inside the chaos consuming his home, his words felt heavier. From upstairs came the sound of furniture scraping violently across hardwood floors. Victor emerged carrying a wooden jewelry box beneath one arm without even acknowledging Emily as he passed. Denise followed behind him, holding stacks of documents against her chest. They moved through Walter's life, piece by piece, stripping entire rooms bare. And every time Emily tried protecting something, they looked at her like she was standing in the way of what belonged to them. The only room the relatives seemed unwilling to touch was Walter's bedroom. It sat at the far end of the hallway, dim and stale, carrying the faint smell of dust, old books, and cedarwood. Emily stepped carefully inside late that evening while the others argued downstairs about property taxes and insurance papers. The mattress remained neatly made, as if Walter had simply stepped outside for a moment and might return before sunset. She began cleaning quietly, folding shirts and stacking weathered notebooks beside the bed, when something strange caught her attention. Deep scratches marked the wooden floor beneath the nightstand, not random damage, repeated marks, like heavy furniture had been dragged across the same spot over and over again. Emily frowned and knelt lower. Nearby, a narrow section of wallpaper had been peeled back and carefully pressed into place again. Inside one of Walter's old books, she found folded scraps of paper covered with numbers and unfinished sentences that made no sense to her. People look where value shines. Walls remember, not the bank. The words sent a chill through her. Hours later, while sorting through receipts stuffed inside a rusted toolbox, Emily discovered something even stranger. Decades earlier, Walter had purchased industrial-grade steel from a manufacturing company 3 counties away. The amount listed on the invoice was enormous, completely impossible for a struggling farmer living paycheck to paycheck. Why would Walter need steel that heavy? Before she could think further, a knock echoed softly at the open bedroom door. It was Mr. Calloway, Walter's elderly neighbor, from across the road. His expression looked nervous as he glanced toward the noisy relatives downstairs. Then he leaned closer and spoke almost in a whisper. "Your grandfather trusted almost nobody near the end." Suddenly, the room no longer felt abandoned. It felt guarded. By the 3rd day after the funeral, the farmhouse no longer resembled a family home. It felt like disputed territory. Victor took control first. He arrived that morning carrying a thin brown envelope and announced he had discovered a new will hidden inside Walter's office desk. According to him, most of the property rights, land ownership, and financial authority had suddenly been left in his hands. The timing felt too convenient, but nobody challenged him openly. Fear and greed had already infected the house. "Sign the transfer forms now," Denise warned Emily later that afternoon, sliding papers across the kitchen table. "Before attorneys start making this expensive for everybody." Emily refused. From that moment on, the atmosphere turned vicious. Locks were quietly changed overnight. Emily returned from town one evening and found herself unable to enter through the back door she had used for years. She started hearing footsteps outside her bedroom after midnight. Once, she woke suddenly and caught someone searching through Walter's closet with a flashlight before disappearing down the hallway without a word. Arguments erupted constantly now. Voices thundered through the walls at all hours, fueled by suspicion and exhaustion. Every relative seemed terrified someone else would discover something valuable first, and Emily began noticing something worse. Whenever she left the farmhouse alone, a dark pickup truck followed several cars behind her before eventually turning away. Someone was watching her. Late one stormy evening, desperate for answers, Emily returned to Walter's bedroom and searched through an old cedar trunk hidden beneath blankets. Inside, she discovered a faded black-and-white photograph of Walter standing beside an interior wall that no longer existed anywhere inside the farmhouse. He looked younger, stronger, almost protective. Her pulse quickened when she turned the photograph over. Written carefully in Walter's uneven handwriting were 8 chilling words. "Some things should only be found by the right person." For the first time, Emily realized the hidden clues were not accidental. Walter had left them behind intentionally. The town historical office sat beside the railroad tracks in a narrow brick building that smelled of paper, mildew, and old wood polish. Emily arrived just before closing time, carrying Walter's photograph inside her coat pocket. Outside, grey clouds pressed low over the empty streets, while cold wind rattled the windows softly. Mrs. Aldridge, the town historian, studied the photograph for a long moment before her expression changed completely. "You're Walter Hayes' granddaughter," she said quietly. "Then you deserve to know what really happened." For the next hour, Emily listened in stunned silence. Decades earlier, Walter had owned one of the largest agricultural supply companies in the county. The Hayes family had money, land, employees, and influence stretching across 3 towns. Then, almost overnight, Everything collapsed beneath a vicious legal dispute that poisoned the entire family. Rumors spread everywhere afterward. People whispered about missing accounts, forged signatures, stolen contracts, and business records that disappeared days before major court hearings. Some believed Walter had stolen from his own relatives. Others claimed someone inside the family betrayed him first. But nobody ever proved anything, Mrs. Aldridge explained carefully. And Walter never defended himself publicly after the investigation collapsed. Instead, he withdrew completely. He sold property quietly, disappeared from local politics, and spent the next 30 years living inside that aging farmhouse, while the rest of the family rebuilt their reputations without him. Emily's chest tightened as pieces slowly connected inside her mind. The steel purchases, the hidden notes, the strange behavior from the relatives. Whatever Walter concealed inside that house was not simply money. It could be evidence. Suddenly, Victor's desperation made terrifying sense. The family was not searching like people hoping to become rich. They were searching like people terrified the truth might survive them. Emily woke just after 2 a.m. to the sound of splintering wood downstairs. For a moment, she lay frozen beneath the blankets, listening carefully as muffled voices echoed through the dark farmhouse. Then came another violent crash, followed by hurried whispering. Her pulse immediately quickened. She slipped quietly into the hallway and followed the noise toward Walter's study. Light spilled beneath the door. Inside, Victor and Denise were tearing apart the walls with crowbars and hammers. Chunks of plaster scattered across the floor like broken bone. Shelves had been overturned. Picture frames shattered beneath their boots. Victor's face glistened with sweat as he attacked the drywall with frantic desperation. When he saw Emily standing there, his expression darkened instantly. "You've been finding things," he snapped. "What did he tell you?" Emily stared at the destruction in disbelief. "You're destroying his house." Victor laughed bitterly. This stopped being about the house a long time ago. For several terrifying seconds, nobody moved. Then Victor stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Your grandfather kept talking about protecting the truth. Right before he died, he said somebody finally deserved to know what happened." Emily felt cold all over. "So there is something hidden," she whispered. Victor's silence confirmed everything. Suddenly, the entire family conflict changed shape inside her mind. This was no longer greedy relatives fighting over inheritance money. Everyone in that house believed Walter had concealed something powerful enough to destroy lives or change them forever. And, judging by Victor's panic, time was running out. Later that night, after the others finally retreated upstairs, Emily searched through Walter's old workshop again with trembling hands. Hidden beneath rusted tools and folded tarps, she discovered a small brass key wrapped carefully inside faded cloth. Beside it rested a handwritten note. "If they find this first, everything disappears forever." Rain hammered the farmhouse roof long after midnight, surrounding the property with a steady, hollow roar that almost concealed Emily's footsteps. Upstairs, the relatives had finally gone quiet, though she doubted any of them were truly asleep. The entire house felt tense now, like something buried beneath it was slowly waking up. Emily carried a flashlight, and Walter's scattered notes as she slipped carefully into the basement. The wooden stairs groaned beneath her weight. Rusted pipes rattled overhead, while cold air drifted through cracks in the stone foundation. Her flashlight beam cut through thick dust, illuminating shelves packed with forgotten jars, broken tools, and decades of silence. "Walls remember," Walter's words echoed inside her mind. Emily studied the strange symbols she had copied from the bedroom notes, and slowly noticed matching markings carved into one of the basement's support beams. Nearby, old crates had been stacked deliberately against the far wall. Her breathing tightened. She shoved the crates aside and uncovered a narrow wooden hatch hidden beneath layers of dirt and coal dust. The brass key fit perfectly. With a metallic click, the hatch lifted open, revealing a cramped crawl space beneath the farmhouse. Emily crawled inside carefully, her flashlight shaking as the beam swept across dusty ledgers, yellowed maps, and dozens of handwritten records tied together with twine. Every symbol matched the markings Walter had hidden throughout the house. He had built this place like a maze. Then she heard it. A floorboard creaked upstairs. Another sound followed closer this time, slow footsteps descending into the basement. Emily froze instantly. The flashlight beam suddenly appeared beneath the basement door. Someone else was down there with her. Heart pounding violently, Emily grabbed several papers, clutched the brass key tightly in her fist, and crawled backward through the darkness just as voices echoed through the basement behind her. By morning, the farmhouse had descended into complete paranoia. Victor stormed through the kitchen, accusing Denise's son of stealing documents from Walter's office. Denise screamed back that Victor had forged the new will himself. Phones appeared constantly now, relatives secretly recording conversations and threatening lawsuits whenever arguments erupted. At one point, somebody threatened to call the police after discovering a locked filing cabinet broken open overnight. The family was no longer united by grief. They were consuming each other. Emily stayed quiet, watching the chaos unfold, while Walter's hidden papers remained concealed beneath loose floorboards in her bedroom. The more the relatives fought, the more certain she became that Walter had expected this exact outcome. And suddenly, memories returned differently. Years earlier, after Walter's wife died, the family briefly flooded the farmhouse with sympathy and attention. Emily remembered expensive promises, emotional speeches, and relatives suddenly volunteering to help manage his finances. Yet within months, most vanished again once they realized Walter was living modestly. All except Emily. Looking back now, she realized Walter had been observing them the entire time, measuring them, testing them quietly through patience, hardship, and time itself. The hidden clues were not random protection. They were judgment. Late that evening, Emily spread the maps and symbols across Walter's old kitchen table while thunder rolled outside. After hours of studying the markings from the crawl space, a pattern finally emerged. Several symbols aligned perfectly with the farmhouse layout. Her eyes widened slowly. Every clue pointed toward one place, Walter's stone fireplace inside the study. At that exact moment, a loud crash echoed somewhere upstairs, followed by Victor shouting angrily through the house. Emily quickly gathered the papers, her pulse rising again, because she suddenly knew two terrifying things at once. She was finally close to the truth, and the others were running out of patience. The storm arrived just after midnight. Wind howled across the fields, hard enough to rattle the farmhouse windows, while thunder shook the old foundation beneath Emily's feet. The electricity flickered twice before settling into a weak yellow glow. Upstairs, the house had finally fallen silent. Emily moved quickly into Walter's study, carrying a flashlight, a hammer, and a brass key clenched tightly inside her pocket. Her hands trembled as she knelt before the massive stone fireplace. The symbols had led here, every hidden note, every strange marking. Every warning Walter left behind had pointed toward this wall. Emily pried loose the first brick carefully. Dust burst into the air immediately. Behind it sat another layer reinforced with thick steel plating buried deep inside the structure. Her breathing became shallow as she worked faster, removing brick after brick while rain slammed violently against the roof overhead. Then the flashlight beam caught something metallic, a safe door, huge, industrial. Hidden completely inside the wall, Emily froze. For several seconds, She simply stared at it in disbelief, overwhelmed by the reality that Walter had truly spent decades protecting something inside this house. Then footsteps thundered down the hallway. Victor burst into the study first, followed by Denise and two other relatives. Their faces changed instantly when they saw the exposed steel safe behind the fireplace. Nobody spoke at first, the room filled only with thunder and heavy breathing. "You knew," Victor said finally, stepping forward slowly. "You knew this whole time. This belonged to Walter," Emily replied, standing protectively in front of the safe. "It belongs to the family," Victor snapped. "No," Emily whispered. "I think he wanted the right person to find it." The tension inside the room turned suffocating. Denise grabbed her phone while another cousin moved toward the fireplace. Outside, distant police sirens suddenly echoed through the storm after neighbors reported the screaming and fighting. But nobody moved anymore because Emily had already pulled the brass key from her pocket, and with every terrified eye fixed upon her, she slowly inserted it into the lock. The lock clicked loudly inside the silent room. Then, with a deep metallic groan, the safe door slowly opened. Everyone leaned forward, expecting diamonds, stacks of cash, or hidden gold. Instead, Emily found rows of sealed boxes, leather-bound journals, faded photographs, cassette tapes, and thick bundles of legal documents tied carefully with string. Victor's face tightened instantly. Walter had documented everything. Emily opened the nearest journal with shaking hands. Inside were dated entries spanning nearly 30 years, each written in Walter's uneven handwriting. Names appeared repeatedly beside financial records and handwritten notes describing secret meetings, missing accounts, forged signatures, and threats made behind closed doors. Victor suddenly stepped backward. "No," he whispered. Emily grabbed another folder. Inside were photocopies of bank transfers connected directly to Victor and several other relatives during the exact period the Hayes family business collapsed. Hidden beneath them were signed statements from former employees who admitted they had been pressured into falsifying company records decades earlier. Walter had never destroyed the evidence. He had hidden it. The room turned deathly quiet except for rain battering the windows. "You framed him," Emily said softly, staring at Victor in disbelief. Nobody answered, because the truth had already exposed itself. Years earlier, several family members secretly sabotaged Walter's company from inside, draining accounts and manipulating records before shifting blame onto him when investigators arrived. Walter could have publicly destroyed them all, but instead he sacrificed his own reputation to prevent the family name from becoming a national scandal, and he lived with that betrayal for decades. Emily's chest ached as she continued searching deeper inside the safe. Beneath the journals rested another hidden compartment lined with velvet cloth. Inside sat untouched government bonds, stacks of gold coins, and land deeds whose modern value reached into the millions. Denise gasped loudly. Walter had preserved an enormous fortune in complete secrecy all these years. But now, Emily finally understood why. The money had never been hidden from strangers. It had been hidden from the family itself, until the truth could survive beside it. Emily's trembling hands reached deeper into the safe, until her fingers touched a small cassette recorder wrapped carefully inside cloth. Attached to it was a note written in Walter's handwriting, for the family. Nobody spoke as she pressed play. Steak crackled softly through the study before Walter's voice finally emerged, older and weaker than Emily remembered. Yet every word carried painful clarity. "If you're hearing this, then the truth finally mattered more than appearances." Victor lowered his eyes immediately. Walter spoke slowly, pausing often between breaths. He described how wealth had changed the family long before the business collapsed. Money turned brothers suspicious. It turned love transactional. It taught people to smile while secretly calculating what someone else was worth. Then his voice softened. But loneliness teaches harder lessons. Emily felt tears sting her eyes. Walter explained how, after losing everything, nearly everyone disappeared from his life. Calls stopped coming. Holidays became silent. The farmhouse grew emptier each year until only one person kept returning without asking for money, property, or promises. Emily. She came when there was nothing left to gain, Walter said quietly. That's how I knew who she truly was. The room remained frozen in shame. Emily glanced around and saw it clearly now. The anger had vanished from the relatives' faces, replaced by humiliation and fear. Police lights flashed faintly through the rain-soaked windows outside, while officers approached the porch downstairs. Walter's final attorney statement rested beneath the recorder. The farmhouse, the hidden assets, the land deeds, and every remaining part of the estate had been transferred solely to Emily Hayes. Victor looked physically hollow as the reality settled over him. The evidence inside the safe would likely reopen criminal investigations buried for decades. Careers, reputations, and entire relationships were about to collapse under the weight of Walter's hidden truth. But Emily barely noticed any of it anymore, because for the first time since Walter died, she finally understood something that broke her heart completely. He had never forgotten her kindness. Weeks later, the farmhouse no longer felt haunted. Fresh paint covered the cracked walls. Broken porch boards had been replaced. Sunlight finally reached rooms that had spent years buried beneath dust, bitterness, and silence. The old property that once echoed with greed now carried the steady sounds of rebuilding. Emily kept Walter's workshop exactly as he left it. His tools remained hanging neatly above the workbench. His faded coat still rested beside the door. Sometimes, during quiet evenings, she sat inside, listening to wind move across the fields the way Walter once did for hours at a time. But she refused to let the fortune disappear into isolation again. Part of the hidden money funded repairs for struggling businesses downtown. The neglected community library reopened with Walter Hayes' name above the entrance. Families who once whispered about him with suspicion now spoke about sacrifice, loyalty, and truth. For the first time in decades, Walter's name carried respect instead of scandal. One peaceful afternoon, Emily cleaned Walter's favorite chair near the study window and noticed something taped carefully beneath the wooden frame. Her breath caught as she unfolded the tiny yellowed note hidden there years earlier. The real inheritance was knowing who you are when everyone else forgets. Emily read the words twice while tears filled her eyes. Outside, golden sunlight stretched across the fields surrounding the farmhouse. The storms were gone now. So was the bitterness that nearly destroyed the family forever. Walter's secret had uncovered greed, exposed betrayal, and delivered justice. But in the end, the greatest thing he left behind was not wealth. It was peace. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more powerful stories like this. And tell me in the comments, if you discovered a hidden safe inside your family home, would you open it alone or call the whole family first? Honestly, your answer might reveal more about trust than money ever could.